Today we're talking the 2003 1-ounce silver Libertad, and we're also going to talk about another metric that's going to help you assess whether gold and silver are overvalued or undervalued. Stay tuned.
Your winner by unanimous decision, and still world heavyweight champion of the world, the Mexican Libertad. Ladies and gentlemen, your host, Tiddy Hunter.
So in the last two videos, we talked about two valuation metrics that let you know whether gold and silver are over and underpriced. If you go back to those videos, the first one I talked about was how is gold priced or silver priced with respect to the money supply. And then in the last video, we looked at the ratio of the Dow Jones to gold. What is the ratio of one to the other? And today we're going to talk about the gold to silver ratio. And so this one helps us track as well, not specific targets per se, specific prices versus the last two. They kind of let you know, okay, this particular price looks like the top if we're comparing it to like 1980, for example. We're here, it's not a specific price. You're not going to have a specific price that you could project. And I've also warned you, the price target could just change from one day to the next one month to the next. So the Dow gold ratio, the Dow Jones right now is like 45,000. So for Dow gold ratio to be 1-to-1, you need gold at like 45,000. But the day you have 1-to-1, it could be the Dow Jones is down to 20,000 and gold hits 20,000 as well. And you have a 1-to-1 ratio. So you got to keep that in mind, that these metrics are always changing. You want to keep tabs on them from month to month, because whatever the price target might be, it could be something completely different than you thought a couple months ago. So in this case, gold to silver ratio, this is the same website we talked about last time, the macrotrends.net, and it goes back 100 years. And if you notice on the particular chart that I'm showing here, I kind of truncated the time period. I start right around 1970, and I did that for a very particular reason. Let me show you gold price on the same site, Macro Trends, going back for 100 years. And there's basically two things to talk about and why I started at around 1970. So prior to here, around 1933, before gold went through a revaluation, gold had been fixed at about $20.67 from 1834 to 1933. And then basically, I'm sure if you've been stacking for a while, you've heard about this. FDR basically confiscated gold from its citizens through an executive order telling them, hey, you have to sell your gold, and then basically devalued it by 40% by setting on January 1934. He repriced it at 35, and then that has been the norm all the way to the famous Nixon temporary suspension of gold convertibility in the early 70s. And so that is the exact reason. Once we've suspended that gold convertibility of the dollar, gold no longer backed by gold, purely fiat, then that is when this gold to silver ratio makes sense, because prior to that, they were always keeping gold flat, and now it makes sense here. And so what it essentially tracks is what is the ratio of the gold price to silver. If you divide the current gold price by the silver price, what is that ratio? And right now we're at about the upper 80s. If you divide those two prices, we're at about the upper 80s currently right now in September 2025. And folks will always say, what are we benchmarking against? And if we look at the peak in 1980, January 1980, we were down here at, it was December actually, the bottom, 15.13. So interestingly, right around before we had the suspension of gold convertibility, it also converged down here to very close to 15. So one could say, an extreme value historically, once the dollar became pure fiat, it looks like the 15-1 ratio. And then if you want to look at, okay, back in 2011, when gold and silver had a top, and a lot of folks thought, that was it. That was the grand top for them. They're going to fall in price from there on out. It dropped to almost 30, this ratio. And so the idea is, if you're thinking about this, doesn't really give you a target per se of what gold should be priced at or what silver should be priced at. But it's basically more like this metric is more like an alarm bell. As you start approaching 15, you really can say, okay, they're probably priced at their peak once you get close to 15. So it's probably time to leave. So to summarize, right now, the gold to silver ratio exactly today, it's not showing here the exact price on this chart on the screen, but I have it right now, the live quote of the ratio at 86.88, essentially based on the going bids on both of them, gold and silver. So in terms of thinking, if we're at an extreme, if you think it's time to cash out based on this metric, and if really we talk about the last two prior metrics from the last two videos, we're far from the top. We have got a ways to go. So now let's talk about the 2003 silver Libertad, the 1 ounce. Take a look at the mintage stats. So 2003 really stacks up close to even with the 2002 in terms of mintage, a little lower at 805,000 versus the 850,000 or the 2002. And I haven't mentioned this in a while, but just to reflect how I mentioned, they're stacking. And within the world of stacking, a lot of people, the beginners, they pick up American Silver Eagles and they see that, there's a premium for Libertads and they're like, I don't want to buy those. I don't need to pay for that premium. But just to remind you why people are paying for a premium and why the premium should be even higher. 2003, 805,000 1 ounce BU silver Libertads. If we go to the world of Silver Eagles here, 2003 on the BU side, you have almost 8.5 million. So Libertads on that specific year are less than 10% of the quantity of the American Silver Eagle. So we have 805,000 minted 2003 1 ounce silvers, and graded there are only 373 on the NGC side and 231 on the PCGS side. So like I've mentioned before, less than 1% of the mintage for most years have been graded. So the top grade, there are no 70s either on NGC or PCGS. 69s, there are 24 69s for the PCGS side, and there are 61 on the NGC side. As a reminder on the graded stats, if you go to the subreddit Libertad Coins on Reddit, if you pull up my old posts, I did the 2003 one 6 months ago, it shows, and I kind of give you a historical perspective of, on the NGC side, that's kind of what I tracked. I don't have that many PCGSs, but NGC I established what the graded population was from when I started in 2021, and then I captured another snapshot in 2023, and then currently 2025, although this quote unquote current is 6 months ago. So it kind of gives you a feel for how the graded population has changed over time. And I also talk about the top grade, and I show the population of the top grade over time. So if we're going back to 2021, what I have in here, I picked up the snapshot that there was 222 graded at NGC. So we have gone from 222 to 335 6 months ago to 373 today. So anytime you could go reference the stats I posted under my profile, you check out all my old posts, and it kind of lets you know and gauge, how fast have coins have been submitted to get graded over the years. So let's take a look at eBay comps. But before getting started, something I just wanted to mention, I mentioned in the past, but I like to remind everybody, you could come to eBay and look for sold comps. You can go on other sites like Great Collections, Heritage, for example, and you'll see what the going rate is for coins. But you want to bear in mind that that price that items are going for is not ultimately the amount that gets reimbursed to the seller. Those platforms take a cut over 10% in almost every case, unless there's unusual special circumstances of volume sellers or whatnot. But otherwise, there is an expectation when you're on other platforms, when you're on the private Facebook groups, when you're on Instagram, when you're on the PMs for sale subreddit, there's kind of an expectation on the buyer side that, okay, let's just say we're gonna go on one data point just to prove a point. The 2000 a raw 2003 Libertad is $70 on eBay. There's an expectation that you're not going to be asking for $70 off of these platforms that charge a fee. So if you're on a PMs for sale, there's gonna be an expectation that this number is going to be closer to $60. Assuming that $70 is the going rate, for example, just to give an example. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. And then whatnot's an outlier to me. That doesn't even count because I don't know if folks are getting drunk before going on whatnot or whatever it is that's going on there. They're selling coins constantly for above eBay comps. Makes no sense whatsoever. But given that, let's talk about the comps for the 2003. Completed sold listings filters on, ended recently, and you kind of start scrolling through. So the one I talked almost $70. It was $69.71. You had one several days ago go for $69. Those are 2 ounces. We're not going to look at those. Also, several days ago, about a week ago at this point, $65.99. September 4th, $89. September 3rd, $63. September 1st, $75. There's probably variability with so many sales in little time. Maybe some FOMO going on because silver is really starting to take off right now. And the other nuance is essentially folks are going to click into the listing. They're going to zoom in on these pictures and see how many imperfections are on there. The more imperfections you could see, lower the price. For example, this $50 one, I don't even have to zoom in and you could tell it's quite beat up. So just bear that in mind that not only do you got to deal with the condition of the coin that causes variability in the sold comp, but also right now in this particular time period, you have silver prices just fluctuating dynamically to the upside, and we're going to see a lot of variance in the coming days. If you start seeing days at some point where silver moves $1 in a day, it's going to be a little tricky to keep up with the sold comps over time.
Click that subscribe button for more data-driven coin analysis.